Suzel, I think you had some comments that you wanted to talk more about admin duties.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I ended up being administrator for 3 years rather than 2. By this course, with every year, because the convention that the race started for was canceled. So we just sort of stopped in midstream, and we checked with people to see if they wanted their ballots and thus money back. No one did. So then at least one of the people who had been standing for the first race decided not to stand the next time, so we had to start all over. And I was very lucky because Seattle is sort of a mecca for fans at the time, and for a long time we were adding it up, and I think we have had at one time here in Seattle 6 TAFF winners and 3 DUFF winners. And at the time I was working this aside, that we had, of course, Ulrika, people who've moved here. They weren't necessarily native or, living in Seattle for many years. And several of these folks, Victor Gonzalez, and of course, Velma Bowen, Stu Schiffman, and Randy Byers, all of whom, of course, have passed away. And then for DUFF, we had Janice Murray, John Berry, and Jerry Kaufman. And so Randy was the immediate North American TAFF administrator before me. So it was very simple for us to share things. And so we could drive to his house to pick up the 10 boxes of stuff that he'd accumulated or that had been sent to him, including T-shirts that came from, I don't know, the Hoover administration. I'm not sure, but they were not in good shape. Jerry and I actually had to go through and actually toss things that were, I don't think anyone wants 10 moldy T-shirts, that sort of thing. But I was lucky because I had both Randy and Ulrika to help me as administrator. I'd bounce stuff off of them. And what do you think about this? Because we had some gnarly stuff going on, things that we don't talk about, even certainly something like this. There was a problem that I inherited. The problem was solved and went away before I passed my administration on to Steve. Steve Green was the next administrator.
Oh, good for you.
But we had, they both had inherited some of it themselves. It was a long-term thing. So there was that. So so that part of the administration was interesting. I think that there are certain things that you have to accept as an administrator. I was very lucky because I had Jerry, who not only essentially wrote a good deal of my TAFF report. I mean, we both wrote it, but he gave me the not only the bones, but the meat and quite a number of organs for me to actually be able to do it. And he also helped a lot as we raised money with auctions and sending things out. And also there were people who, like John Hertz, he did some publications that all the money went to TAFF, went to the fan funds, but to TAFF and DUFF. So there were a lot of people out there helping, and I assume that that's true. And we're talking about the ballots and the election part of it. Mark Plummer had developed a wonderful spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that was wonderful, and I used it and passed it on. And I never knew what happened to it, if anybody else ever used it.
I don't know if it's the same spreadsheet, but we have a Google Sheets spreadsheet that as every vote comes in, what side it's on, we enter it and the date it was received and the name and the donation and what the vote is. And then once it's all done, at this point, there's a bunch of, columns that, it doesn't keep it running tally of the votes. You do that like all at the end, as far as if I can tell and remember from the last race. But
paper. We did it on paper.
Of course.
Nice.
Well, I don't know what they did before Mark developed that spreadsheet, but it was just perfect because they also could tell me if it eliminated, if we needed to go through another set of votes, another set of recounts and all of that. And so I did pass it on. I don't know what happened to it, but I think folks may not realize that there is a lot of work involved with being an administrator. And if you take it seriously, unfortunately, we've had some on the different fan funds that didn't necessarily or weren't able to do that. But someone will leap in and take it for them, which is our one of our good graces, I think.
I've never actually had any problem with the voting system since it's the Australian preferential voting system, and I just it just flows naturally to be able to count the Australian votes. So yeah, I never had any real trouble with the administration. Joseph was easy to deal with, and then it was, if I remember correctly, it was Eve Harvey who had to deal with me, and there was never any problem. There was a couple of phone calls to work out that we were sending Irwin over to conspiracy in 1987. That was a 3-year gap, and there was never any problem. And the main fundraising I used was auctions, because for some strange reason I started doing auctioneering and enjoyed myself. And my technique of if you entertain people, they pay more money. As Geri discovered when I auctioneered in Dublin with you.
That was good. It was very good. Yeah, and I'm a current. It's like when I first became administrator, I was going to get off incredibly lucky because we were doing 2 back-to-back North American races, and so I was going to be administrator for basically a year, or about that length of time, and then COVID hit, and Mike won, but then couldn't take his won in early January, and then couldn't take his trip, and now I will be turning over administration to him when he gets back from his trip in May, and there are some things I feel like I've done very, very well. I think the fundraising during the time of COVID, and we've learned some really cool things about online auction catalogs that are super popular, and I'm in love with them and want to keep doing them, even though I'm slow at layout and spend all night at a Worldcon putting it together foolishly. Yeah. And the, both thanks to Dave Langford's, utterly splendid, both his fan fund sites, which are, this unofficial source of online information, combined with the free TAFF ebooks, where you can download the ebooks for free, but gee, if you'd like to show your appreciation, and money regularly trickles in from them, and I am very pleased that we are currently about $1,400 ahead of how much money was in the TAFF fund when I took it on, after paying my trip expenses. And that's on the North American side. The European side is in very good shape right now. But we've only published 1 issue of the TAFFish newsletter, and I'm supposed to be doing the next, and I don't have it out. And one of the really cool things that a couple previous administrators, I don't know if John Purcell started this, but did newsletters that had interviews with all of the candidates. And that was really good. And we're now down to, there's just a month of voting left, and we haven't planned that for this time. And I'm kind of feeling it's like, oops, I'm kind of letting the side down here. I should make this happen. But so it's a mix. I kind of feel like I'm really good on some parts and not so good on the other parts. But overall, not unhappy with it, but look forward to, I think I'm going to be one of those people who stays involved in an ongoing basis. Some fan fund winners do, some don't. I think these days it's really useful that we have this fan fund admin list that is of kind of all the funds of past delegates, and I've floated questions by that list and gotten really useful information. And there was at least one time when I should have floated a question by the list and didn't. Different judgment things. But administration, I guess one of the things I love about the fan funds. Okay, I'll come back to what I love and jump to you, Justin.
The major problem I suspect in not in Australia but overseas, is the banking problems when you get checks and everything like that, or whatever the transfer system is used nowadays. We're very lucky here because all the bank accounts for the various fan funds are held by the Australian Science Fiction Foundation, and that makes it really easy for us to do funds transfer and things like that.
And this comes back to one of the things I love about the funds is how, I came out of crazy Minneapolis fandom, and the whole notion of fairy and the very relaxed way of people just handling and not being a very rules driven. I mean, there are rules, there's guidance, but administrators have an incredible amount of leeway. They're held up. Teresa Nielsen Hayden's TAFF in 13 paragraphs is a really good description. It's on the TAFF page. It's a really good description of, when you break fanish trust, you're in trouble, and fandom trusts things and you don't want to break it. But, oh man, you've got so much leeway to decide, okay, when are we going to have a race? When are we not going to have a race? The delegates on their trips, they get given money. And yes, TAFF, one of the things we have promised to do, Johan, it's been too long since we published kind of a detail accounting of what money is coming in, what money went to things. But there are some standards. A few of us have, on our transatlantic flights on Norwegian, paid for the extra amount to get the more comfortable seating, and we charge TAFF for the basic seat and then personally pay for the extra. But that's our personal decision. And if a fan fund winner basically went, no, I have physical needs that I need the more expensive seat, they get to decide that. Kind of what it goes towards, and I really like, and I have a personal account. Banking is getting harder, and Aaron Underwood is looking at what we can do on the U.S. side for DUFF. Right now, the previous administrator is holding on to the DUFF funds, and she is not holding on to them. And things got kind of messed up with PayPal on her personal PayPal account, that ended up being weird, and she ended up needing to close it to get money refunded after I used it to send her a payment following the previous auction when I had sent a payment to that PayPal address. So there's some crunchy parts, but I love the informality of the fan funds. So I would hate to get it really rules oriented and really organization driven. I like it being just personal.
I'm not blaming this on DUFF, but I have turned out to be the person that everyone always asks to be treasurer of things.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. We are just over an hour into this. So I think we're going to end up being a two-part thing on this. We're not going to go another full hour, I don't believe, but we're going to move on to some traveler's tales. And before we do that, I just wanted to ask Gloria, have you seen enough links, and have your questions been answered about funds that aren't around anymore, or where to find information about fan funds? I've seen a lot of links posted and a lot of advice. Oh, I see a thumbs up to everybody. I missed that one before. And we had mention of the inner Filk for the Filk Fund. One of the things I want to talk about very briefly is the fan fund model. And I loved, Leslie, when you said, gee, starting DUFF to help promote Australia, because I had an upcoming Worldcon bid chair. They're looking at bidding for a Worldcon in a country where a Worldcon has never been held, and someone had suggested they talk with me because they're looking at starting a fan fund specifically to promote the travel back and forth and trying to figure out funding models and how they would do it, and concerns about how, because they're concerned, they want to be sure to send the right people to be representing their fandom to help promote their Worldcon bid, their upcoming Worldcon bid. And I had no idea that DUFF had those roots when I talked with them about different ways to think of doing it. And I do think the funded by fandom or some group of fans and the gift economy is an important part of it. And it's one of the reasons I have not yet mentioned, China started the Shimmer Fund that was bringing fans, back and forth to China, that was, clearly out of support of the Chengdu bid. But there wasn't, that one was funded by the funding models that China uses, which are very different than the funding models that the rest of us, or the standard traditional fan funds, have been using. Whereas the Worldcons right now that are doing the local community funds that I think first started with DebtCon, the NASFIC, kind of being aware that they were holding a convention in a very poor, Detroit was a very poor community, and that there would be science fiction fans locally, that even the cost of membership could be hard. And they started a fund where members could donate money to help, increase diversity, but make it more accessible to a wider variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. And Dublin did that. DC had the Capitalized Fund. Chicago has the Chicago Worldcon Community Fund, but those are fans giving the money. And I think that's a really important part of where, kind of boundaries on what we call a fan fund, and how that works. Do we have any other, okay, I'm seeing paper. We'll talk about TAFF Guide to Beer later. I think I'm down to 1 or 2 copies, but I can print another copy. So I may well be able to do that. And yes, Claire Briley's note about encouraging all the fan fund administrators to publish accounts. I think that transparency is really, really important on that. So Traveler's Tales. Oh my gosh, now I've been kind of talking again. We've talked a little bit about fan fund problems. Does anybody want to talk about any other fan fund problems or any fan fund highlights or low points?
There are a number of low points over the years which we can't really discuss, I'm sure.
Actually, there's been a few problems, but they were dealt with as best we could, and they're gone now.
Okay, you guys are being very circumspect. And I will mention one of my own experiences, because when Abby Frost took her TAFF trip, I was the first place she stayed, and she talked about her financial difficulties at home, and a little bit of a red flag started to go up of, oh my God, if somebody's in that kind of dire financial straits where they're maybe going to lose their house, is the fund safe? And at the time, I misjudged it. But at the time, I basically went, no, this is so important to her. There's not a problem. I did not see the problem with, but when people get desperate, one of the real problems, and I just think personally, not fan fun so much, but the more desperate someone is, the harder they can be to help, because the riskier it is to help them. I once had some cat sitters that were neighbors I didn't know well, but they would come and take care of my cats. And they had keys to my house. And one day they showed up and they said, we're returning your keys, when I hadn't asked. And then they came in and, oh my God, their electricity was about to be shut off and everything else. And I was really glad they returned the keys, because they could have easily stolen from me at any time to meet their immediate need. So, I understand the Abby Frost not having money to pass on to anybody else. And there have been some others where, gee, your money's tied up and, it's under your personal name, and then the tax authorities come after you. And that's happened. Though that one, my understanding is it got, the administrator, repaid all of the money that the tax, had said. Janice Gulbis commented over in the chat, because the funds are often won by people who could not have afforded to go otherwise, there's a temptation to temporarily borrow money from the funds for emergency needs. You think, okay, here's what's going to happen later, and it's all a cash flow thing, and I'll be able to put the money back, and then things happen. Yeah.
But in general, that's been few and far between after all the years of these fan funds.
Yes.
Yeah. Luckily, there have been people who come in and re-raise the money, shall we say, for people.
Yeah.
So it's not a big issue, and not one that that's too concerning in the sense of, why are we doing this? At all.
In terms of other problems, I did not actually think to try to do a web search on this before, but there were the TAFF wars back when, and actually this gets to a more fun question, because I was going to say, it's like, no, Rob Hansen and Avedon Carroll were both TAFF winners who end up getting married out of having met each other on TAFF trips and encouragement to stand. Geri and Suzanne, are you the only cross fan fund couple?
Yes.
And you were both married, long married before or together?
Well, we were together. Yeah, we didn't get married until we'd known each other for about 18 years. But yeah, right. Geri was the DUFF winner. I was the TAFF winner. And we were the only couple that are winners of two funds, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's other couples that ran as a couple and won one of them, or they did what we did for TAFF, which is basically that Geri came, of course, but we paid for his part of the trip.
You were the delegate. It wasn't that you were a joint delegate, And we've also had examples like Christina Lake and
I was just thinking Christina and Lillian,
who were dear friends who did a TAFF trip together, stood and did a TAFF trip, the TAFF twins.
And then there was Marilyn Pride, Lewis Morley, and Nick Stathopoulos.
Yeah.
Oh yes, remember that? I remember them as well because they stayed with us. A different subject Geri was going to bring up.
Mark Plummer has pointed out Maureen Kincaid Speller and Paul Kincaid. Maureen was TAFF in '98 and Paul was GUFF.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
So back to back. They were administering two different funds at the same time.
I remember when Maureen was here, but I didn't realize about Paul. Okay, so there's another one.
Yeah. So cool. Let's talk. Okay, I'm going to jump in with the embarrassing moments or other anecdotes from our trip. On my TAFF trip, I was staying with Lillian Edwards in Edinburgh, and we know the stories about, I don't know, the toaster broke and nearly setting houses on fire, and the whole how do Brit toilets work and everything. But I'd been to Britain and Scotland many times, and I got in, and Lillian was asleep, and I got up and I was going to shower, and I could not figure out how to make the shower come on, and I was like, it's like, just a minute. I've never had this. I could not figure out how to make the shower come on. And it was a nice deep bathtub. And it's like, okay, I'll take a bath. And the stopper wasn't in the drain. It was sitting up on the tub. And so I put the stopper in, but then I couldn't figure out how to put the bathtub stopper in. And I had just dealt with my sister's bathtub stopper that was this weird thing where you push down on it and it like engages and pops back up when you push down on it. So I put this metal stopper in the tub, pushed down on it, and it stuck there. I took my bath, and then it was like, okay, how do I get it back up? And pushing on it didn't make it pop back up. And I had this shampoo. It was called Silver, but it was a bright purple shampoo, and my hair was dyed with some purples and different colors at the time, and it was a color preserving shampoo. And I could not get this bathtub emptied, and it was tinted with this light lavender, really kind of pretty water, but otherwise unusable, somebody else's bath water. And it was the only bathroom and bathtub in the house, and Lillian then woke up to having an unusable bathtub. And I felt very incompetent. And it ended up being, I think, 125 or 150 pound bill that I talked with the fan funds list, and we decided that, because it hadn't been a deliberate anything, it had been an accident, that it was appropriate for the fan fund to pay the plumbing bill rather than for me to personally pay the plumbing bill, even though I was in a position where it would not have hurt me to pay the plumbing bill personally. But it felt like a valuable kind of example of, okay, under these kinds of conditions, a host has opened their house to a fan fund delegate, and something has gotten broken, and it was like, what insurance doesn't cover, and we would expect a homeowner to have insurance, but so yeah. So other trip anecdotes. It can be something embarrassing, it can be something fun, it can just be trip memories. Tell us some stories.
No, I'm going to get in before Geri says this one. I'm actually going to tell you a Geri story, because Geri, when he was the DUFF delegate in 1983, yes, I got it right, and there was nothing in the Constitution that said that anyone can nominate to run that next year's national convention. So a group of us got together and nominated Seattle to be the Australian National Science Fiction Convention, which duly won the bid. So thank you, Geri. It's a shame it was never run.
They took their gavel back.
Now, I'm going to elaborate on that. Wasn't the story I was going to tell, because I did write that all up in my DUFF report. Hey, I wrote a DUFF report. What it said in the Constitution was that the site selection meeting would select the site of the next year's Natcon, and it had to be in Australasia, unless the site selection meeting decided otherwise. That was the loophole we got. The night before the vote, Cliff Wind and I went around appointing people at random to be on our committee and just having fun with it. I didn't expect anything really to come of this except a Saturday night goof. But Sunday morning, indeed, and I didn't remember that Justin was that much involved in it. I remember Michelle Moissert and Terry Frost being the ones who dragged us, me and Cliff, into the site selection meeting, because they were putting in a formal bid for us. We were bidding against Adelaide, which was the only site that was bidding, because it was a year before the Worldcon, the 85 Worldcon, and people felt they didn't really want to spend a lot of money, a lot of energy, I should say, on promoting and holding a convention. And we did win. We won by a matter of a couple of votes. Well, there were only about 40 people voting. So, and we did, Cliff and I named it SpawnCon, our national convention, because we figured there's SwanCon in Perth. We would be SpawnCon because we had salmon coming up the rivers to spawn. And we published a progress report, and we made more plans. And then the Natcon, they still held a Natcon in Adelaide despite our having won. And at that business meeting, they voted to change the wording in that clause and make it retroactive. That's how it was taken away from us. So
this is apparently a fan fun tradition because Terry Frost, in '98, we got the WesterCon business meeting to say that sites in Australia would be eligible for WesterCon if either Australia or the United States were to annex each other.
That was the one
Thank
that
you,
came to mind
Janice.
for me.
And
Terry
in
Frost.
2003, they tried to repeal it and it failed.
Ah,
Yeah,
Terry
well,
Frost
Western Australia is
and
trying to
Michelle
secede at the
Boisert
moment.
were real mixers. They were the one, I believe that at least Terry Frost was involved in having the door at one of the slant shacks in Australia get nominated for DUFF.
The
And
Roger
that's enough.
Street door.
So I'm not going to do my other anecdote.
Okay. So Leslie or Suzelle, do you have any others? And then John Purcell, we're going to come to you after either of them, if you want to tell the story you told up in the chat. So
nothing. My only thing that I was very embarrassed about, which is different than doing it well, is and Geri actually put it in the chat. So, but when I was at Interaction, I was sort of given a list. I put on various programming items and everything, and I made it, as I was saying before, it's sort of your responsibility to do things. And I made sure that I was, even if I was half asleep because of the jet lag, I was on that panel, asleep, but on the panel. But when they gave me my schedule, it didn't say that I should be at opening ceremonies.
oh,
Maybe they just assumed that everybody goes, and we would have, but British Airlines lost Geri's suitcase, the big one. We had several, the main one with all his clothes in it, for about 3 days.
oh geez.
So we went into Glasgow to the department store so Geri could pick up a few clothing items. And it happened to be, it was during opening ceremonies. And when I got back, I discovered that they'd introduced me as the TAFF delegate, and I wasn't there. And I was so embarrassed. I mean, I
Yeah.
but so that was kind of the ones I can tell or remember at this period of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to mention two souvenirs I got, which is the Australia in '75.
Oh.
That's beautiful.
Yes, they gave it to me, and I have a picture here of me holding it that appeared in a paper there, but it doesn't look like it's the same person. I can tell you that. But this one, I received at LA It says Lesleigh Luttrell, DUFF recipient 1972. Welcome back, and it was presented at LA from the Minneapolis people.
Oh, that's
yay,
great.
Minneapolis. So I understand that John Purcell is off at the park right now. However, Marty Cantor, you had a story that you had put up in the chat and mentioned. You want to tell that to us?
Yeah, I can mention it again. It's one I will never forget. I'd gone to AussieCon 2, and I knew Walt Willis. So we were sitting in the fan room and one big circular table, we were talking, and he said, oh, could you introduce me to any of the American fans? I said, sure, no problem, Walt. And for the next hour and a half, I introduced him to all kinds of people, every single one of whom happened to be an Aussie. Not one single Yank came by at that time. And I knew all the Aussies.
Yes, North American fans for down under definitions of North America. I like it. I like it. Another minute or two on, does anybody else want to pipe in with any other, put in the chat if you want to, oh, Justin, yes. Anecdote, Justin.
On the American leg of my trip, I finished up in Madison, Wisconsin, and Spike Parsons, myself, Jean and Julie Gamol did a car trip to Iowa. And in Iowa, it's exactly where Jean met Scott.
On that car trip?
In Iowa City, Jean had been set up to meet Scott at that convention. And cool. That's history.
Wow, that's cool.
anything can happen
Oh,
on our
we
fan
were
fun
playing
trip.
Trivial Pursuit all the way in the car.
What a great group. What an absolutely great
It was a lot
group.
of fun, I can tell you.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and bring us into the current day for a few minutes. And I already had mentioned earlier different funds like the Corflu 50 and the kind of ongoing expanding funds. I do think that we've had both the one-off funds and kind of this evolution, and I guess I don't really see that personally changing. You know, people see a good idea and they see it working well, and then they go, well, how can we do that? What can we do with it? And right now, and thanks, I'll call out John Coxon for a moment, because for TAFF for years, you know, kind of the getting your fan fund trip report became less than a, you know, common thing. It was more like a Doherty project that never happened. And in the last, you know, in this millennium, there are a lot more TAFF reports coming out. And Jean Gamal actually published TAFF Forensic, and I will get the link to that in the chat. You can also get it through the list of all the fan fund reports things, though. I was having problems. Lulu wasn't working with Firefox last night, but it worked with Chrome. So if you get a blank page, you know, don't give up. Yes, John's saying I have produced twice as many TAFF reports as many people, but still many less than Claire Broyley. Janice saying I'm proud the cover of my DUFF trip report being the first collaboration between Brad Foster and Teddy Harvia.
Oh.
And we've, you know, John Coxon both did his own TAFF report and then caused Anna Raftery. Okay, John, pipe in and say her name right for me. Raftery. And did both the video things, but then has the produced TAFF report. And that's another way that the fund, you know, the bounties that Skiffy is still paying, FANAC, because they're doing so many other things now and things that cost money, they have had to reduce the amount of the bounty, but they're still paying bounty for TAFF reports, or sorry, the major fan fund reports, right? Let me get that right, Joe and Edie. Certainly TAFF and DUFF. Sorry, I didn't say okay, I didn't give Edie any kind of heads up warning on that. And now I'm trying to follow the chat and do everything at the same time. But so one of the questions in current times was, you know, to do traditional trip reports still makes sense. And I personally love seeing the wider variety of ways people are doing trip reports, but I love seeing trip reports myself. How about others? Trip reports, keep them, get rid of them?
Keep them for yourself. How the heck would I have remembered all that stuff if I hadn't written it up?
Yeah. Do we have any people that want to argue against? We ought to get rid of. Suzel is holding up.
I can't figure out. There we go. That's mine.
Yep.
I think we should. Well, I think that we should keep them because also you're right, Leslie. I was looking through mine last night and going, oh. Or things I hadn't quite remembered. I hadn't remembered how much of this Geri actually wrote, and some things that had happened along the way that I just didn't remember. So part of the reason that I couldn't just start from scratch myself was early at the beginning of my trip, I started writing fairly copious notes, and about a day and a half into Worldcon, I realized I can either be at the con or I can make notes, but I can't do both.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided that on the train, we were going to have a lengthy train ride right after the convention. I thought, well, I remember enough, and I have a few things I can write out the notes on the train. And normally I don't get motion sick on trains.
Oh dear.
But I did on this one, to the point where I had to stop doing anything. And I couldn't write at all during this, 5-hour ride or whatever it was. And that kind of stop me from taking notes. But aside from that, it's a wonderful way for your own, to get your own stuff together and to let other people know. So if you can, I understand it's difficult, and some folks have simply never done one, and like Justin, but
Thank you.
but if you do one, it's really a good thing, and I think people should, attempt to. Some people are coming out with them now for the first time. We've just Ulrika is doing chapters of her report finally after
Nice.
time.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
I suspect that Jean's is the longest because her trip was 87 and it just came out like last year. Came out during the pandemic.
Well, we all had less to do.
It affected us all differently. I hope everyone is able to see the chat, because there's both a great deal of humor with Allison Scott arguing, I think we should scrap trip reports right now. And she's the current GUFF delegate.
Oh,
who actually took a virtual GUFF trip.
She did.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Allison, but do you want to spend a minute telling us about your
I took a virtual GUFF trip and I saw lots of lovely people and it was fantastic, and I went to a lot of very interesting places by 360-degree YouTube videos on an Oculus Quest, and I had a lot of fun, and I possibly did not take notes that were quite as good as I should have done. So if you remember anything about me coming to see you in Australia or New Zealand, or anything that I did while I was there, if you wouldn't mind emailing me, that would be very, very handy. Kate, thanks, bye. But I mean, and it's coming real soon now. I've drawn a lot of pictures, so maybe I have done way more stuff already than the minimum for bounties. But I feel like Australia and New Zealand are quite big places, and I have quite a lot that I'm supposed to be writing.
What are your current?
That's a minute. That was about a minute, right?
Oh, what are your current?
And it's lovely to see everyone. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Okay,
And the back chat.
Allison, what are your current thoughts on when you'll be doing your physical?
Oh, that's a good point. Right. So I think Australia is now open, but New Zealand is not. And I want to wait until I'm fairly sure that my trip won't get scuppered halfway through, because I think that will be a pain. But I'm kind of wondering whether September, October time might be possible. There's some complexity because I quite like to go to ShyCon as well. So I'm seeing if I can work out which is not anything to do with GUFF, but I'm seeing if I can work out the logistics of that. Spring 2023 is not a perfect time because I'm part of a team that is bidding the EasterCon. So if we get the EasterCon, we don't know if we will, but if we get the EasterCon, then I'll probably be out from January to March 2023, and then it'll be so either towards the back end of this year or middle of next year is what I'm thinking about.
Justin, Allison was not here. She joined us late. She did not hear about.
Yeah, I'm afraid I was at dinner with my folks. So
are you familiar, Allison? Are you familiar with Justin's trip? Because your ShyCon and wherever, Justin did this decades ago.
So following in the footsteps of Fanish Giants, they say.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, thank you. No, 32-week trip, Allison.
What? Yeah, I think I'd die. How old were you, Justin?
In 1984, I turned 27. I had my birthday in the Hague.
Okay, so I mean, I'm actually at the point where if I go away from home for a long weekend, I start to feel a bit strung out. So I am slightly worried about my capacity for an uber long trip. Though I am a road warrior, there's absolutely nothing stopping me doing all of my job anywhere in the world using tools available to me on this dining table, really.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, coasters, bottles of wine, that sort of thing.
Well, in researching for this, I was relieved to see that Bridget Bradshaw had done I think a 56-day trip, 56-day trip, because I took Nick Ferry gave me some heat in his fanzine about taking a 42-day trip and that was excessive and that I was spending like, too much of TAFF's money on my trip or whatever. And I'm like, before he didn't, it's like just
Isn't Nick here tonight?
too long. And so hearing about Justin's 32-week trip today, which I did not have any idea, I think he wins the prize for the longest, but yeah,
Longest
Janice
and stupidest, yes, I know.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't done a trip report, my penance is to keep raising money and keep people aware of the fan funds.
Yeah.
So I will continue to do that until I produce my trip report, which will mean I have to do it till I'm dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And we again have lots of comments of different forms of things that have been done for trip reports with slideshows and Bill Rotzler, producing, an avalanche of art. And the okay, what was
the only thing that I've done 3 little chapters which were published, but I did take a couple of photo albums to Conspiracy in '87, which were lying around the fan fund room. A couple of the photographs were removed, of course, because they were a bit bit racy.
And Lesleigh pointing out that thinks there's room for a graphic novel trip report. I totally agree with you on that. So, back to following up more on the impact of COVID, yes, all 3 of the major fan funds have delegates waiting to take their trips. As I said, Mike Lowry, Orange Mike, is setting out in 2.5 weeks, and he's starting at the Eurocon in Luxembourg and going to Warsaw, Poland, and then to EasterCon and then to Sweden. He is still hoping to go to Spain. He's still got, a few weeks of the trip after he spends the time in Sweden. And during the first part of the trip, he's going to be putting together, kind of over the next few weeks, what the rest of the trip works like. But I think he needs to be home like by May 2nd. So he's just under a month. And I personally love with TAFF, like, GUFF in being so international and tying in so much of Europe. I love seeing TAFF TAFF delegates. And I personally, I knew Martian going into it in Dublin. I met 2 other Polish fans who were there who were so thrilled and so excited. I was the first TAFF delegate ever coming to Poland, and it was their enthusiasm for this was fantastic. And I love that Orange Mike is building even more on that and going to more, other countries. In terms of innovations of current day that we've come up with that I think we should keep, one I mentioned earlier is to whatever degree possible, having auction catalogs, getting them more information. And to whatever degree we can open it up so the whole world can bid on things. And I think we're there's different opportunities there and ways to do things. But I think that's terrific. Dave Langford, back to the various heroes and talk about a fan fund winner who has stayed involved. His unofficial TAFF pages. And again, that's the informality of it. This is the unofficial stuff. And it's this wealth of all this information. The one TAFF innovation that we've done this year is a number of people have pointed out that the 20% rule has the ability, if you've got too many people standing for TAFF, and even when I was standing, I had one, very dear person to me say, well, gee, there's 4 people standing. When they created this rule, I said, here's the mathematical problem with the 20% rule. You could have a race with 4 people that no one won. And so he kept kind of waiting for that to happen. And it didn't that time, but Johan Engelmark and I talked about it and decided that, in races with more than 3 people, we will take it down to 3 people before we apply the 20% rule. We will do the eliminations before that so that we won't have everybody get eliminated by the 20% rule and then not have a winner, from however many people are standing. And I believe that's a good mathematical correction to this, to avoid a situation we never want to have happen.
That's
Let's say
exactly
one last thing.
Let's have Leslie first, please.
I
And
was
then
just
Marty.
gonna
Okay.
say, this sounds so much like selecting delegates for political conventions. I've sat through math lessons on that.
Yeah. Okay, Marty.
Just one last thing. Since Robbie and I both ran on the same race, we both wrote trip reports. So how did we handle it? Have you ever heard of the ace doubles?
Excellent.
That's what we did. We both published on the same one, but like that. It worked. Maybe not good reports, but that's beside the point.
I think that's a lovely Fanish way to handle it. And I also like that as a couple, you had your individual reports that you then published together, but that you each had your own report. That's cool. Okay, we're going to open it up for a few minutes of general questions. If anybody, I'm been trying to keep up with the chat. It's been a really great chat, which means I've had to scroll back several times. But do we have any other anecdotes, things that other winners want to say? But Justin first.
Yes, just one other thing I'd like to say. There are a number of people who have never won fan funds who are the sort of the unsung heroes of the fan funds, and there are also the people who have stepped in to administer funds when other people have not been able to. There's Kerry Hanfield, who handles all the bank accounts in Australia. Mark Ortlieb, I'm going to embarrass you right now, because he and I were heavily involved with the Old Lang Fund and the Sure Thing, which brought out Bob Shaw and Dave Langford, and then there's various other people who have done so much. Claire Briley and Mark Plummer are definite candidates for that. There are just people who work behind the scenes doing so much for the fan funds, and I'd like to thank them.
Spike Parsons, Spike does a lot.
Yeah, Spike's one of the saints.
On current day things, I would like to call on Perry Middlemas, who has a really cool idea for ShyCon that we're working to pull off. Perry, would you like to talk with us about that?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. What I've raised at a recent FANAC meeting was the idea that we have a fan fund photo call in a similar way to the annual past Worldcon chairs photo call. So that at the Worldcon we would try to get as many people as are attending that are past fan fund winners, including the current fan fund winners, of course, together for a photo call. Probably we've had a bit of discussion as to when this might be held, and at the moment it looks like we're aiming for the 30 minutes prior to the fan guest of honor speech. This has got the added bonus that it also drags more people into that particular speech. But I would also like to extend it, if that's going to be at all possible, in order to get, say, a similar thing happening at the Australian Natcon, British EasterCon, Eurocon. The thing about it is that it's already been mentioned here today that we've lost a number of past fan fund winners. If you look around, and I know I'm feeling it, some of us are feeling a little bit on the old side, that we really should have records of people in the same way that they do with the past Worldcon chairs. So what we're aiming to do is starting it off, if possible, at ShyCon. I've been in contact with Geri about this, and we're going to try and set up a specific 30-minute period prior to the fan guest of honor speech. And if you are going to be at ShyCon, it'd be really good if you can keep that in mind and turn up. So if possible, we'll have a DUFF fan photo call, shovel all them out of the way, bring the next batch in, and then do TAFF. And if there are any GUFF winners there, we'll throw the GUFF winners in there as well.
So do it as individual versus a huge thing where it's like I'm, and you could even do years or whatever, but like we have it, the whole combined. And
I don't mind if you think it's worthwhile doing it for the whole combined. Hey, look, this is detail. Haven't got the detail figured out yet. Let's get the overall framework going. Just the idea that we actually have a photo call first off.
There was a photo call for GUFF winners at AussieCon 4, and I've just sent the link, which shows a fair number of younger and older fans celebrating X number of years of being DUFF delegates.
All right, well, that'd be good that we can have that. But it may have happened in the past, but I just want to get it to the stage where we start having it as a regular thing.
A regular thing, yep.
Yeah.
And the challenge, that we're going to have is program room. We need a quiet space so that you can hear it, but program rooms tend to be very tightly scheduled at WorldCons, and so. Getting the space and getting it become part of the, yes, this is something we do. So working on it.
Is there to be a fan lounge?
Well, that could be noisy, but it's possible.
There expects to be a fanzine lounge that will be near the FANAC exhibit and near the WorldCon history. I want to say organization. It's like Heritage, the WorldCon Heritage Organization, which is the Kent and Mary Bloom thing. But those will be down in the exhibit hall, and the exhibit hall will likely have a lot of background noise. Though I do want to say, the Zoom that was done in the fan lounge, okay, and where we raised the toast to Randy Byers, and I was cat sitting at Deb and Mike's house. That there were people, but you could hear that pretty well. So yeah. So any other question? And Janice has pointed out of getting an auction scheduled before that might be another possible time. And I argued against that, thinking that half an hour before, when you're trying to set up an auction. So I think, but even after, you're trying to then get everybody to pay and get out of the room and space. So those seemed like chaotic times, but they've got us doing. So Guy, me, is that to call on you as a question? Okay, I don't know what Guy was saying me for.
He needs to.
He's on mute.
How about now?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, we got it. All right, I'm on.
Yes.
Yes.
Wanted to mention something that an idea that I'd like to see happen. We did our DUFF report with a wonderful cover by Alan White, and I've just started printing these out. I'm going to do another edition of this with some photographs, I think. But I would like to see a website or some such where all of the DUFF and TAFF trip reports can be gathered. And because I had a heck of a time finding these reports when I was trying to write my own, when I was trying to get a list together of the various reports for the Sasquan program book that we did. I was able to get a list of the reports names, but very few of the actual reports came to me. I was able to also, it was very difficult to find out where people had gone on their various fan fund excursions, the various conventions that they attended. Sometimes we just didn't know, and even in their trip reports, when I had them, they didn't mention the name of the convention. So it could be a real, that was a challenge. Nevertheless, got some good feedback on the list that we finally did publish. And and of course that list has been, was due to Langford's list, and also it contributed to Langford's list too. But anyway, I would like to see that link, if you want, or a series of links to the or any kind of collection of these reports, because they're wonderful. Ron Ellick's report from back in the day, priceless, absolutely priceless. But it's gone. Who can read it now? Very few. Only those people who can manage to find it on Joe and Edie's wonderful website, and that's not everybody. I'd like to see a special TAFF, DUFF, GUFF website with that kind of information.
That is, Guy, that information, we've been publishing links over in the chat throughout this Zoom. I have just put a whole pile of them over in the chat, and Dave Langford's unofficial TAFF, DUFF, GUFF pages have links to that. FANAC has a bunch of stuff. You can find chunks of it in different places. It may not all be everything everywhere, but there's a lot out there, a lot more than people expect. And
yeah, but like you say, it is everywhere. I'd like to see some sort of this kind of information, this kind of collection of information. Vital. I think that's really, really terrific.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody, it should be, with the changes that have come to fandom, certainly in the last couple of years, and certainly as we saw at this last Worldcon, we're going to need to really push the fan funds, because I think they're repositories of information and of events and of personalities that fandom needs nowadays. Because what they have now is something entirely different. We're getting, that's another question, of course, but I think that would really be valuable.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions, comments, etc., or should we stop recording and move off to SocialCon? Any closing comments from Lesleigh, Justin, or Suzelle?
That's me 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
An Australian newspaper.
I remember what you looked like then, Lesleigh. That didn't look a lot like you.
No, it didn't. But it is me.
Well, just being involved in fandom in general, and certainly as part of the fan fund community, has been very interesting and important part of my life, I think, since I tend to be more involved in fandom than anything else, really. So I'm glad I'm involved. I'm glad I'm still involved. I don't think the fan fund administrators list is it's occasionally will be used, but I think that the new folks coming in the different fan funds should know that they can ask us and come to us for questions and problems. And even though it's been a while and things have changed, we can probably figure something out.
I have just posted a link. TAFF voting is open until I believe it's April 22nd. We've got a 4-way race that is absolutely great. We are very appreciative of the healthy number of votes we've gotten so far, but encourage people, they are regularly coming in. And again, thanks to the splendid Dave Langford, we have online voting available that makes things very, very easy. You can also mail things into us, either to Johan or me, but it's all on the ballot. And we've got a TAFF race going on right now, so please vote if you haven't already.
One thing, just to note, people who aren't following the chat, you can't actually copy it and save it if you want to read it later, or save all these wonderful links. But Mark put up a link to, we took a photo of all the TAFF winners who were at the Corflu in Winchester in 2010. I've been searching on my computer everywhere for this photo and I couldn't find it. So if you would take a look, it's a lot of fun.
So I'd like to thank everybody who came today. We've still got 40 people here and we've had a couple of drop off. It's been absolutely fabulous. Really enjoyed doing it. I want to thank FANAC and for hosting this, and especially thank Lesleigh and Justin and Suzelle for being primary participants. But I completely love seeing everybody here who has been involved with and supportive of and interested in the fan funds over the years.
Thank you. Geri very much for wrangling this and taking the real lead on this and coming up with and asking us, pulling it together. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jerry.